Hey, it's been a while. Remember me? Because I barely do. Anyways, welcome back to yet another video. It's been a while. I missed you. You know, it's a long time since we got to hang out like this. You know, so I constantly get the question when we're gonna release optimization updates, and the truth is that almost every single patch we make contains some form of optimization. It's sort of a never-ending battle, but some changes have a bigger impact than others. And today, I'd like to share some of the work that's gone into improving the performance for the game coming in 1.0. Before we dive into the topic at hand, there are two things that I want to address. First thing is that you may have heard news that our parent company, Embracer, has sort of released a press release where they're saying they're planning to transform into sort of 3 standalone publicly listed entities, of which Coffee Stain and Friends, working name, the parent company for Coffee Stain Studios is one of those. I'm not gonna go into detail about this press release, honestly, because it's a little bit above my pay grade. You can find a link in the description if you want to read more on the press release, if you're interested in that kind of stuff. But there's been a bunch of speculation as to how this affects Satisfactory, and I just wanted to sort of come on here and sort of set the record straight on these things. So these changes to the company structure will not affect our plans for Satisfactory at all. We're still gonna release the game this year, 2024. It hasn't changed the scope for 1.0 at all, and we also plan to keep working on Satisfactory after 1.0 is out. Whether that's in the form of DLC or free updates to the game is yet to be decided. It might be either, it might be both actually. So we'll sort of see. But development for Satisfactory is still going strong. And actually, speaking of which, that's sort of the second thing I wanted to address here. And it's sort of, give you a little bit of a state of development, because it's been a while since we published a video here on YouTube channel. So yeah, we've been very busy behind the scenes managing the Clos Beta for the select few that managed to get picked. Around 1,000-ish people have been playing the Clos Beta now for a couple of weeks, and the general feedback that we've gotten has been pretty positive actually, and it's been really refreshing to hear all the nice things that people have said. There's obviously a few technical things. We already knew that, and there's gonna be more of that down the line, but so far everything's looking peachy actually. So with this last bit of feedback, we're now gearing up for the final push, and hopefully it won't be long until we can maybe announce sort of a release date or something like that. Who knows? Exciting times. Anyways, with that out of the way, let's get to the main course and talk about optimization. My favorite thing. One big disclaimer is that performance is sort of tied directly to your hardware and configurations, so some of these changes may be significantly more notable for some people rather than others. So yeah, just bear that in mind, that performance varies a lot from person to person. Also worth noting is that I'll put as much of this into layman's terms, but there might be some technical jargon going on here and there as we go into details, so just bear with me. Let's start talking about foliage, our favorite subject. Everybody loves foliage. So right now there are colliders for the vehicles, which allow them to sort of detect contact with any foliage and sort of destroy it as you're driving. This results in pretty huge performances, as when you're driving through especially foliage dense areas, but also in places where foliage is nearby but not necessarily in your path, thanks to wonky hitbox detection that we have. In 1.0, most foliage colliders are going to be completely removed from vehicles actually, which means that going forwards you can't destroy smaller foliage by driving. It will simply just persist in the world, which honestly also looks a bit better than when it just vanishes into thin air when the first pixel of your vehicle hits it. So we've thought at first this was going to be a strange change, but actually when testing it out we felt like this kind of actually makes sense. Most noteworthy for dedicated servers, foliage has been a huge culprit of RAM, where sometimes it reached over 12 gigs on just a fresh save file. So not having collision on foliage will reduce it down to somewhere around 5.5 gigs, which is a huge improvement. Relaxing foliage collision will also help greatly with level streaming and reduce overall stuttering, because we're not trying to demolish dozens of objects within a second many times in a row all the time constantly. So that's great. But vehicles will still be able to destroy almost all foliage that requires at least the chainsaw to get rid of. So it's not gone totally, but it's gone for the majority of the smaller foliage types. Where the fine line goes between exactly what foliage is destructible or not is something that we're still sort of figuring out and fine tuning. So if you ever use belts, then you'll be happy to know that we've optimized those significantly. Belts and pipes currently exist within sort of unique instance groups in Updated, meaning that each length of belts between connection points was sort of managed by themselves. But in 1.0, they're going to be pooled together instead. This is a big computational relief for your CPU, as it won't have to work through as many instances of belts and pipes as it currently does. So now instead, belts and pipes belong to like fewer but bigger pools, and now instead we're relying on the GPU to do the heavy lifting. GPUs can work extremely fast even when computations are chunky in size, which is why we're settled for this like fewer but bigger approach. This helps stuff like shadow rendering a lot, since shadows will also belong to massive pools being calculated and drawn, rather than like many individual objects or like smaller groups. It's also great for instances where many small belts occur frequently, which tends to happen a lot. A prime example of this is manifolds, where belts currently have to be computed per belt, no matter how small they are, which they tend to be in manifolds. After this change, again, they're pooled together, and the DPO will just like show it all through. One thing that a lot of people ask us about is whether we're going to use nanite for conveyor belts. And we did play around a bit with nanite splines to try and like optimize the belts, but in the end we sort of ended up settling on our own instancing solution because we found that it worked better for our game. Speaking of objects that may occur frequently everywhere, we've now introduced a system that sort of converts several architectural buildables that players don't interact with, or don't produce anything, into data-only objects. Currently, these buildables are what's referred to as heavy actors in Unreal Engine, like buildings that have like logic and actually do stuff. The most common examples going data only would be, foundations, walls, or architectural buildables like railings or stairs and such. What changing the fancy term means is that we're basically cutting a lot of fat from a massive amount of stuff present in almost all factories. So now we only store the crucial data for these things, like locations, the mesh that's using, customization data such as like the colors, and the recipe that we're built with. And the cool thing with all this like lightweight data stored in a pre-prepared location in memory is that writing it to save data will be much faster. So hopefully this will reduce the time the game stalls when saving when you have like a big old factory. We're also skipping a bunch of steps when gathering save data for these lightweight buildables related to production, which also saves a bunch of time. On that note, load times could also be a lot faster in 1.0, and actually quite substantially faster. Because when all objects were heavy actors, spawning them was costly because we had a bunch of code that was like running through everything, loading it all, no matter if it was a foundation piece or if it was an assembler being spawned. So having non-production buildables be lightweight allows us to skip a bunch of this code and set your files up faster. And the actual save files will also be a lot smaller. Non-production buildables being lightweight. By the way, I just realized I probably haven't pronounced lightweight properly, but it's too late, we're too deep into it, we gotta keep going. Non-production buildables being lightweight also helps decrease runtime memory consumption. Actors are huge in Unreal, and with so many heavy actors turned lightweight, enjoy not having like every inch of your RAM being used up by Satisfactory. This also connects to multiplayer, because when actors are replicated to clients in Unreal Engine, it requires that those clients allocate memory to track the state of the actors. Lightweight buildables means that this extra data is no longer needed. So yeah, TLDR, lightweight system makes stuff that don't have logic a lot smaller and easier to load and gooder. And on the client side, when playing multiplayer, joining a game is also much faster now, because processing those lightweights is so much faster than plowing through all these like heavy actors that existed before. There's also a ton of general tweaks here and there that by themselves don't really amount to much, but altogether add up. Stuff like reducing unnecessarily large texture sizes, sorting stuff that was thrown together quickly for testing and then forgotten, and fixing straight up broken shit in the world. And this means that VRAM requirements are now a lot lower across the board. Scalability settings have also been looked at and adjusted so that people can expect a more reasonable result from their settings. For example, the performance hit going from medium to high in specifically shadow quality settings was pretty weird, so we've adjusted that. And since the last update, we've also upgraded Unreal Engine to 5.3. This will give the game a general sort of performance boost, since Epic has fixed a bunch of stuff on their end. It also resolves a couple of crashes some people were running into. And look, okay, I know what you're thinking, okay? 5.4 just came out. Are you gonna upgrade to that one? Why aren't you upgrading? Well, okay, so there's a couple of reasons why we're not going to upgrade to 5.4. It just isn't viable for 1.0. We might do it in the future, but this is the version we're going to ship 1.0 with. And for all you upscaler enjoyers out there, you'll be happy to learn that we've updated DLSS and FSR to their respective latest versions. So if you're using those upscaling options, then you should also see a bit of an improvement there. And finally, in the last video, we talked about new features coming to dedicated servers. Well, in the land of optimization, dedicated servers have also seen some pretty massive improvements thanks to stuff like the foliage collision thing and the pooling of belts and pipes. However, we're also experimenting with dedicated servers to enable streaming. Up until now, the way dedicated servers has worked is that like it loads everything in the game, so it loads the entire map and everything on it. And by enabling streaming for dedicated servers, this means that everything on your server doesn't have to be loaded all the time. So if you have like a bunch of people hanging out in like the same area, loading that space should be enough until you start using the map more, which obviously will sort of require much less memory. When you do start exploring and building far away from each other, then the stress of the server will sort of scale appropriately instead. So those are some of the improvements coming in Satisfactory 1.0. I'm sure there's going to be even further optimizations between now and final release, but this is where we are right now. You may have noticed that there was a bit of a gap between this video and the last one. There's, like I said before, there's a ton of stuff going on behind the scenes. It just makes it really hard to push out these videos continuously right now, but we will be back on track soon enough. So please bear with us. And until then, I hope you have a lovely day, stay optimized, and take care. Yay, optimization, hooray! Oh shit, I forgot to put on the beanie. Oh no, did I record the entire video without the beanie? Oh no, oh, will people even recognize me? Oh man, oh bummer.